All right, so let's jump into this deep dive on how to win friends and influence people. And, you shared this book with us, so it's obviously something that you think has a lot of value, and I'm with you there. So today we're going to try to extract some of those golden nuggets, some of that wisdom that can help us build better relationships and become more influential.
It's interesting because Carnegie's work goes so much deeper than just those like surface level tips.
Well, yeah.
He was really tapping into some fundamental principles of human psychology.
Yeah, exactly. Like when he talks about, avoiding criticism, I mean, he's not just saying be nice, he's saying there's a reason for this,
Right.
because criticism, it makes people defensive. And then when they're defensive, they're not open to being influenced.
Yeah, think about it. Like when someone criticizes you just like have this aha moment and you're like, oh, you know what? You're right.
Right.
I'm going to change my behavior.
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
You're more focused on defending yourself. You're not focused on like, oh, I really need to understand this person's point of view.
That's so true. And Carnegie understood this. Back in the 1930s. I mean, this is way before like, the whole self-esteem movement and everything. But he understood that to really influence someone, you first need to make them feel safe. You need to make them feel understood. And that's where, he brings in sincere appreciation.
And it's not about flattery. It's not about manipulation. It's about like genuinely recognizing and acknowledging like the good in other people. And I think that's something that's really missing today is that idea of just like celebrating other people, for who they are and what they bring to the table.
Okay, so we've got this foundation. Ditch the criticism, embrace understanding, embrace appreciation. But then, like, how do we actually make people like it? He has those 6 strategies, but, I mean, some of them just seem so simple, like a smile, really.
It's easy to dismiss the simple things, but I think sometimes the simple things are the most powerful. And Carnegie was such a keen observer of human behavior. He really understood that, like, a genuine smile can trigger all these positive responses in other people.
Well, and I've even read that, smiling, it activates mirror neurons in the other person's brain, so it creates that like instinctive sense of connection and warmth.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like, oh, I'm being polite. It's actually triggering an unconscious positive response in the other person.
Absolutely. And, and it works both ways. When you smile at someone, you're more likely to feel happy yourself. So it's really a win-win.
Now, remembering names. Okay, I will admit this is one that I struggle with sometimes, but he brings it up again and again. Why is this so important?
Oh, I think it's so important because, think about how you feel when someone remembers your name. It just makes you feel seen. It makes you feel valued. It makes you feel respected.
Yeah.
And, in a world where things often feel very impersonal, that one little act of remembering someone's name, I think it creates a really powerful connection.
It's like you're saying you matter to me enough for me to like store this information about you.
Exactly.
You're not just like a random face in the crowd.
Right.
Which kind of leads into another one of those strategies, being a good listener.
Yes, and this is more than just passively hearing words. It's about actively engaging with what the other person is saying. It's about asking clarifying questions. It's about really trying to understand their perspective.
So it's not about just waiting for your turn to talk. It's about like drawing the other person out and making them feel like what they have to say is important.
Exactly, and it's a skill, and it's a skill that can be learned and developed with practice. You can become a much more attentive and engaged listener, which is going to benefit every aspect of your life.
So we've talked about, ditching the criticism, showing appreciation, smiling, remembering names, and really truly listening. And it seems like all of these are kind of these building blocks to creating a genuine connection with people. But what about when you actually need to persuade someone? You need to like win them over to your way of thinking that feels like a whole other ballgame.
Absolutely, and that's where some of these principles, I think, can be misinterpreted or even misused. So it's important to remember that influence should never be about manipulation or coercion.
Right. We're looking for that sweet spot where we can effectively present our ideas while still respecting, the other person's point of view.
Yes.
And one of the big things he talks about here is avoiding arguments.
Yes. He said, arguments rarely, if ever, change anyone's mind. They just make people more entrenched in their own position.
But how do you avoid an argument when someone's like right there in your face and they're like, no, you're wrong, I'm right?
Yeah.
How do you not go there?
It's really about shifting the focus from winning the argument to understanding the other person's perspective. So instead of immediately going into defensive mode, try to really listen to what they're saying.
Like, help me understand why you feel this way.
Exactly.
Oh.
And often you'll find that there's common ground even if you don't agree on every single point.
So it's more about trying to find that shared understanding than trying to, like, beat them over the head with your viewpoint.
Yes, you want to create a collaborative atmosphere. You don't want to create a combative atmosphere.
Right. And that's so important because, if somebody feels like you're attacking their beliefs, you're not going to persuade them. You're just going to make them dig in deeper.
Exactly. And that's why things like letting the other person do a great deal of the talking can be so effective.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. Because, honestly, who doesn't like to talk about themselves?
There's a psychological reason for that.
Yeah.
It really taps into our innate desire to feel heard and understood. And when someone allows us to talk about ourselves, we just naturally feel more connected to them.
It's like you're saying, your thoughts and feelings are valid.
Exactly.
They're important to me.
Then it also gives you really valuable insights into their thought process, their motivations, their values, which can be incredibly helpful when you are trying to persuade them of something.
Yeah, so you're not just passively listening. You're
Yeah.
actively gathering information that will help you connect with them on a deeper level.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. And then there's that one where he talks about, making the other person feel like the idea was theirs.
Oh, yes.
I love that one.
I love that one, too.
Because it's like you're guiding them towards your desired outcome without making them feel manipulated.
You're kind of planting a seed and allowing it to grow organically.
Right.
People are much more likely to embrace an idea if they feel like they came up with it themselves. It taps into that sense of ownership and autonomy.
Yeah. And it's like you're saying, I trust you.
Exactly.
I trust you to come to the right conclusion.
And that feeling of trust can be incredibly persuasive.
Yeah. And I think this all really ties back to one of the most fundamental principles in Carnegie's work, which is empathy.
Yes.
It's that idea of, really stepping outside your own perspective and trying to see things from the other person's point of view.
Understanding their needs, their fears, their motivations. When you can do that, when you can really connect with someone on that deeper level, you build a bridge of understanding, and persuasion becomes so much easier.
So it's not about, tricking them. It's not about, manipulating them. It's about, like, meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
Connecting with them as a human being.
And that's what makes Carnegie's work so timeless.
Right.
He understood that influence isn't about techniques or tricks. It's about building genuine connections based on empathy and understanding.
Okay, so we've kind of laid this groundwork. We talked about ditching the criticism, embracing empathy, understanding how to make people feel valued and heard. But now I'm thinking, okay, what does Carnegie have to say about leadership? Because it feels like those same principles would apply, but there's like a whole other layer of complexity there.
That's a great point, and you're right. A significant portion of this book is actually dedicated to the art of leadership, and it's fascinating how he takes these core principles and he connects them to the challenges of actually leading people effectively.
Well, let's dive into that next.
Let's do it.
All right, so now we're stepping into, like, the leadership realm, and it feels like all these principles we've been talking about, empathy, understanding, avoiding criticism, they become even more crucial when you're in a position of guiding others.
Oh, absolutely. Leading effectively, it's not about barking orders. It's not about wielding power. It's about inspiring and motivating people to achieve a shared goal. And to do that, you really need a deep understanding of human psychology. And that's where Carnegie's wisdom, I think, really shines.
So, like, how does he apply these principles to leadership specifically?
Well, one of the most interesting things he does is he challenges this deeply ingrained notion that criticism is the best way to correct mistakes and improve performance. Instead, he argues that praise and honest appreciation, even when you're addressing shortcomings, are far more effective in motivating lasting change.
That's interesting because I feel like we're kind of conditioned to think that, you got to point out people's flaws to get them to, like, step up their game.
It's a common misconception. But think about it from your own experience, when someone focuses on your mistakes. Do you feel inspired to do better, or do you feel deflated and defensive?
Yeah, probably more deflated.
Right. Criticism, it often triggers that fight or flight response, which makes it really difficult to learn and grow praise. On the other hand, it creates a positive feedback loop.
Right.
It encourages people to strive for excellence.
So even when somebody messes up, he's suggesting, like, start by, like, genuinely appreciating what they did well.
Exactly. Acknowledge their efforts, highlight their strengths, and then gently guide them towards improvement.
So instead of saying, you really messed this up, it's more like, hey, I really appreciate how quickly you responded to this situation, and here's how we can maybe approach it even more effectively next time, or something like that.
That's a great example. It's about framing feedback in a way that encourages growth and learning, rather than shame and defensiveness.
And it goes back to that whole thing about letting the other person save face. Like, nobody wants to feel humiliated, especially in a professional setting.
Exactly. Preserving someone's dignity, I think, is so crucial for maintaining trust and respect, which are absolutely essential for effective leadership.
He also talks about, using indirectness when addressing mistakes.
Yes.
Can you, elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, he understood that sometimes a subtle approach can be much more effective than direct confrontation. So instead of pointing fingers, he suggests finding ways to call attention to mistakes indirectly.
So, instead of saying, hey, you didn't meet the deadline, it's more like, it seems like we encountered some challenges in meeting the deadline this time. Let's discuss how we can avoid those roadblocks in the future.
Exactly.
Yep.
You're addressing the issue without making it a personal attack.
That reminds me of that other suggestion he has where he talking about your own mistakes before criticizing someone else.
Oh, yes. That's so powerful because it really creates a sense of vulnerability and humility. When you're willing to admit your own flaws, it makes it so much easier for others to acknowledge theirs.
Yeah, it kind of levels the playing field.
Exactly.
And it shows that, mistakes are part of the learning process.
Yeah.
Not something to be ashamed of.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about, starting with praise, letting people save face, using indirectness. But what about, when you actually have to give, direct instructions or guidance?
Well, even then, Carnegie suggests finding ways to empower your team, rather than simply dictating orders. So he advocates for asking questions instead of giving direct commands.
So instead of saying do this, it's more like, what are your thoughts on how we could approach this challenge?
Exactly. This encourages critical thinking, it encourages problem-solving skills, and it really fosters a sense of ownership and accountability within the team.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
When people feel like they're part of the solution, they're way more likely to be invested in the outcome.
Absolutely. It taps into their intrinsic motivation and creativity.
And Carnegie was a huge believer in the power of positive reinforcement.
Absolutely. He understood that even small improvements deserve to be acknowledged and celebrated. This encourages continued progress, and it creates a much more positive and supportive work environment.
It's like you're saying, I see you, I appreciate your efforts, and I believe in your potential.
That's the heart of it, Positive reinforcement. It's not just about giving compliments. It's about fostering a growth mindset and helping people believe in their ability to learn and improve.
It makes me think about, that suggestion of giving the other person a fine reputation to live up to.
Oh, yes. He believed that by highlighting someone's strengths and potential, you could actually inspire them to reach new heights.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, I see greatness in you, and I know you're capable of achieving amazing things.
Exactly. You're setting a high bar.
Right.
And then you're providing the support and encouragement necessary to reach it.
And then I love that want to make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest.
Yes.
It's about framing tasks and requests in a positive light, highlighting the benefits, creating a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
So instead of being like, oh, you have to do this, it's more like, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to showcase your skills and really make an impact.
Exactly. You want to align their motivations with the desired outcome.
Okay, so we've gone from, avoiding criticism, giving praise, to creating a positive work environment, empowering people to take ownership. And it feels like all of these leadership principles are really just extensions of those core principles of connection and understanding that we talked about earlier.
You're exactly right. Effective leadership, according to Carnegie, it's not about wielding power. It's not about demanding obedience. It's about building genuine connections, fostering trust, and inspiring people to be their best selves.
It's about creating a culture where people feel valued and respected and empowered to contribute their unique talents.
And that's a leadership style, I think, that transcends industries and generations. It's about tapping into that fundamental human desire to feel connected, appreciated, and inspired.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the foundational principles of connection to the specific techniques for effective leadership. And it's amazing to me how Carnegie's insights, written almost a century ago, are still so relevant today.
That's the mark of truly timeless wisdom. He really understood the enduring power of human connection and its profound impact on our personal and professional lives.
I'm starting to see how these principles, if I can actually apply them consistently, could really transform not just the way I lead, but the way I interact with everyone in my life.
And that's the beauty of Carnegie's work. It's not just a leadership manual. It's a guide to living a more fulfilling and connected life.
Okay, we've really unpacked a lot here, but before we wrap things up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the lasting relevance of how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
You know, why does this book continue to resonate with readers almost a century after it was written?
I think it's because Carnegie really tapped into something fundamental about the human experience.
Hmm.
We all crave connection, we crave understanding, and we crave that ability to influence the world around us.
It's like he cracked the code of human interaction.
In a way, he did, and he presented those insights in a way that's both accessible and actionable. He didn't just tell us what to do, he explained why it works, grounding his advice in a deep understanding of human psychology.
And I think that's what makes his work so enduring. It's not about quick fixes or manipulative tricks. It's about building genuine connections and creating, positive change in the world.
Absolutely, and that's a message that will always be relevant.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive, but before we wrap up, I want to try to distill some of those key takeaways, for you, the listener, that you can really start applying in your life. What are some of those nuggets of wisdom that really stand out to you?
Well, one of the most powerful takeaways for me is that importance of shifting from a mindset of criticism to a mindset of understanding and appreciation. It's about recognizing that every person, regardless of their flaws or mistakes, deserves to be treated with respect and kindness.
That's a great one. It's so easy to get caught up in, judging others or focusing on their shortcomings. But Carnegie reminds us that, true influence comes from a place of empathy and genuine connection.
And that connection begins with, simple yet powerful actions, like offering a genuine smile, remembering names, becoming a truly attentive listener. These are the building blocks of strong relationships, both personally and professionally.
Those small gestures can really make a big difference, can't they? They show people that you value them, that you're genuinely interested in what they have to say.
Exactly. And when it comes to persuasion, it's about moving away from the need to win arguments and instead seeking common ground and understanding. It's about letting go of ego and approaching conversations with a spirit of collaboration.
That's a really important point because it's so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment and let our egos take over. But ultimately, that doesn't lead to productive or meaningful conversations.
Right. And as we discussed, those same principles apply even more so in leadership. It's about inspiring and motivating people through praise and encouragement, fostering a growth mindset, and empowering them to take ownership and contribute their unique talents.
It's about leading with empathy and understanding, not with fear or intimidation.
Precisely. And, as we reflect on all of these principles, I think the most important takeaway of all is that Carnegie's work is ultimately about becoming a better human being. It's about cultivating qualities like kindness, empathy, and respect, which not only enhance our relationships with others, but also enrich our own lives.
It's like he's saying, if you want to influence the world, start by becoming the kind of person others want to follow. And that's a journey that goes far beyond simply wanting to win friends or get ahead. It's about living a life of purpose and meaning.
Beautifully put. And that brings me to a final thought I'd like to leave you, the listener, with as you continue to apply these principles in your life. I encourage you to reflect on this question. How can you use your influence, no matter how big or small, to make the world a kinder, more compassionate, and more understanding place?
Ooh, that's a great one. It's a reminder that we all have the power to make a positive impact. And that influence, when used wisely, can be a force for good in the world. And for those of you who want to dive even deeper into Carnegie's wisdom, I highly recommend checking out the full book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic for a reason, and it's filled with insights that will continue to resonate for years to come.
It's a timeless guide to navigating the complexities of human relationships and living a more fulfilling and impactful life.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep those connections strong, and keep using your influence for good.